Hi, welcome to this new video of ÉSWES. I'm not going to go into details because there's already a number of videos that you can see the URLs for here. Particularly recommend 34B. 25 is a alternate faster pace history. 34B is the one I particularly recommend. 34 is good. 34C shows what I'm going to do now with a couple of guys, a couple of friends of mine. So, 1 second. Before we get into this, let's just have a look at the website that led to this, angeltheory.org. And let's just move these animations to number 1. And this is a beautiful website. I really enjoyed making it. It highlights here the 10 different books in the series, many of which were unfinished, but the collective work became the grounding for Supereconomics. And there's 64 reasons why. Let's have a quick, so we've got the idea. If we just look up here, we can see that there's so much data here. Loads and years of research starting in 2016. That led to the creation of this by the end of 2018. Now, at the end of 2018, I had worked the problem, the ÉSWES equation, out, and I was pretty certain it was correct. So we can just go onto the website, click that, the rest equation there, and this is the what happened on what the result of the end of 2018, October 2018. This article for Paul Krugman and for, in fact, any economist. I did send quite a few of these, about 5 ladies from Oxford, but I didn't get a reply. But then I really didn't follow it up, so I'm not really worried about that. This moment in time, I'm looking for the deal team: Kate Raworth, Coletta Sands, Dana Pott, and Elizabeth Ferrer. I would immediately go to Dana Pott because she's the financial one, but I think she's on maternity leave right now, so it's sort of open to anybody. So I'm just going back to the Angel Theory website. We can see it here. I'm actually going to move it under the res equation, so you'll see it there. But if we go here, res equation 2020, and we get to this, literally went up on Friday. The day is now Sunday. So now we've got the most important section. Now this is in 830 words. It's got the nice graphics which help to illustrate the point. And we end up with a spreadsheet. And this is what we're trying to prove. This number here, 1.07, that's share of global GDP. And this number here, that's 10 million homes built for the what I call the Spartans, the labor. Okay, so this section came out of the book 64 Reasons Why summary, and we can see that here. Here's the book, and you can see afterwards. If we looked at the detail, we would be looking at other places on the spreadsheet. For now, I'm not gonna just read through this because it's, this is something you should read through yourself. It's only 830 words long. What I'm going to do now is show is sort of do the proof, if you like. So, if you don't know this page, please look at 34B, I suppose. Yeah, 34B. and that'll give you an explanation. I'm going to point out certain aspects, but not all. Okay, so we've got global growth here. This is what we expect. What has happened? We're dealing with so we're building a city or a set of cities in Malawi. We are expecting global growth to average 102.5%. So actually it grows 2.5%. And Malawi, we think, will grow by 5%. Malawi in real estate will grow by 5% as well. City-sized developments. This is where 90% of everything comes from. You can throw everything out in terms of how can I prove these trade figures? Throw them out. You know, these are token figures. They're $1 million. They should be billions. This one here is the real estate sold in the primary city, Angel City 1. And, you know, one could argue that. You know, one could say, no, you're not going to get 250 million. You know, I don't really have time for that argument. So if someone says we don't like these figures here, we can just take them out and we take 10% off of what we're going to make. So at the moment, if we go right the way down to the bottom of the spreadsheet, which is we're working on cash flow being 24.28 trillion. Okay, so if we were to take 10% away from that, yeah, this damn thing always does that. Okay, there we go. So yeah, if we take away all the real estate sold from the Angel City 1, we end up with 21.8 trillion. So, you know, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. So let's go back up to the top. So we can ignore the trade figures because they're nominal token figures. We can ignore these, but we've got to take off about 3 trillion of the end result. The aid, I think I've been reasonable with. I don't see many people who know arguing because there is about 150 billion out there in aid. So when you've got a system that turns that into more money each year and does so much good, as we will see, then really we should be flooded with aid. Here's that city that I talked about. There's two cities. There's Angel City 1, and then there's the first network city. This network city starts here. It costs just over $1 billion a year. And it's basically, think of it as not buying a city, but think of this as buying a suburb within a city. And as things go on, new suburbs will come up, etc., etc., etc. One's not building a great big city. One's building a suburb and contributing maybe half of that to the necessary infrastructure. Okay. Just 1 second. So we end up with this figure here. This figure here is this exports plus this Angel City 2 real estate plus aid, and it also is plus the LCR, but we don't have an LCR in the first year. That's the law of conservation of revenue, or simply known as savings. So we have theoretically got 4 billion in cash investment. That's going to turn into the cash flow within the network. And there's another 2 billion due in for the city, the real estate there, the aid, etc., etc. So that 2.3 gets added to that 4, and we have a starting figure of 6.3. Just if you're uncomfortable with the figures, just in your head, take 3 noughts off. And imagine we're working with a network of businesses. Okay, but for now, I'm going to continue as it is. So we have that figure, 6.3 billion, times 90%. That is E. That is recycle efficiency. So if we go to our little graphics, let's do it on here, it's easier. If we go to our graphics, we see that here. Recycle efficiency is when the water that would flow out of the tap at the drain is recycled, but instead of doing this to water, we're doing it to money. We're keeping the money in the system, therefore increasing the cash flow. Then we're going to spin it round so it happens more than once a year. And we can see that here, so it's spinning around. And now we see cash flow has increased again, 15.2 billion. And lastly, we see spinning third time for 21.6. 850 words? No, 870 words is all it takes to explain the system, that if no one can debunk it, which I don't see it, it really is going to completely and utterly change the third world, which in turn will completely and utterly change our world. Our future will be much, much better if Africa and the rest of the third world have the same access to services and finance as do we in Europe and the US. And that's sort of what this book is all about, how to make that money using this principle. So where was I? Okay, here I was. So we're using this principle. The E recycle efficiency, 90%. So of that 6.3, 10% is lost. That's mainly on salaries and imports that we have to buy, land maybe as well. So, and you know, it might not be 90, it might be 80 the first year, it might be 75. But I've gone for 90. So we times the revenue and the savings, that's 6.3, by 90% to give us 5.68. And that is spent within 1 year. And at the end of that year, there's still 5.68 cash in the network. This ends up here, and from here it ends up here. Okay, that's the savings from the last year. That's the money that was spent, but it was spent within the same network, so it's in the network. 90% was spent by companies on other companies in the same network, or labor buying things from the network. Okay, so we've now got that 5.6 billion, which becomes the major part of the total cash flow for the year. And then we see this here, which is, again, it is nominal trade, real estate sold that we can throw away for 10% of the total gain. Aid going out to 1.5, I think that's fair enough. And the second year of the city, another suburb. Or maybe that's the second payment for the same suburb. Or actually, it's probably 50% infrastructure, 50% on the suburb. Yeah. Right, okay, so we have all our money, and it's here, revenue and savings, in red again. This time, we're going to times it by 91%, and that means we've got an E leakage of 9%. So that 8.5 times 91 equals 7.7. But this happens within 191 days. So it's all spent before the 11th of July. And 91% of it is spent from one company in the network to another company in the network. This means after the 11th of July, there's 7.79 left in the network, and it can then spend that all over again, doubling the cash flow for the year. Well, sort of, near to. And that again is timed by 91, and that is spent by the end of the year. Again, this cash flow that is unspent is saved, it is put here, and it is moved to here, and it again is the main contributor to the revenue and savings that the network has, which has now gone up to 10 billion. This figure, like it does before, goes back up here, revenue and savings. And sorry, just one thing on the last year, because it spanned once and spanned twice, it spent all its money 2 times, 91% of that network to network, the year's cash flow doubles. And we'll see the next year it will nearly triple because there's a third spin. Money is being spent faster and faster, so it is effectively spent twice in a year. As for GDP, for various reasons, I have concluded that GDP will be about half of what the cash flow is. You know, maybe it'll end up 35%, maybe it'll end up 65%. So I'm just saying roughly about half of the cash flow will end up as GDP. Okay, so now we're in the third year, 2026. Again, here's our revenue and savings. Now this time we're going to spin it 3 times at an E of 92, so 10.5 goes to 9.7, spent by 12th of May. 92% of that spent from company to company within the network. Therefore, the network has 9.7 in the bank. And remember, this is not Malawi currency. This is cash US dollars in a bank in Malawi with a lot of soldiers around it. That's why there's no inflation worries. No currency inflation worries, which would normally it would cause havoc. But as it's all in US dollars, you know, they're US dollars. That's the value of them. They can't be changed by being in one country, not another. Especially when they're cash. So, okay, we are now spinning 3 times in a year. It's by the end of 12th of May, it's then 9.7, which is spent by the 11th of September, which leaves us with 8.9 in the network. 9 times 92 brings us to 8.24, and that's the third spin that year. Again, this now triples to 26. You see? Because we're spinning 3 times, we've got to count the cash flow in before May. We've got to calculate the cash flow in the summer, or the Southern Hemisphere winter, and we've got to account the cash flow in the last quarter of the year. That all adds up to 26 billion. And now we can start to see quite clearly, if we go back to this diagram, and you see here, it's not the same figures because I used convenient figures of 8 billion. And we can see here with the spin round, that creates that, it doubles it to 15.2 billion. And when we add the third spin, it doubles it again, 21.68, and then we just continue adding another spin each year up until we have 32 spins, and there's so much money, cash flow flowing through the system, and it's flowing really, really fast. And of course you need state-of-the-art software to make this happen, and that's something fortunately I can help with. 1 second. Getting back to the spreadsheet, so we're seeing that happen, on the spreadsheet. First, well, let's see it again. The next year, 2027, now we're spinning 4 times. So we're starting with 12.2, 93E, gives that cash flow, 11.3. After 101 days, that's all spent. 93% of it has been spent network to network. So that leaves 11.3 in the network times. On the second spin, 93% E gives us 10.5 cash flow spent by 15th of July. On the 16th of July, all that money is still in the bank. So we spend it again. 10.5 times 93%, 7% leakage gives us 9.8. And that is spent by the 11th of October, which returns 9.8 times 93% equals 9.1 spent by the end of the year. And now we've got 4 sets of cash flow to count that is spent in the year. That's now equaling 40 billion. And now we start to see some reasonably significant GDP figures. If cash flow is 40 billion and GDP is roughly 50% of cash flow, that means we're now hitting 20%, 20 billion in GDP. Don't worry about these government and labour expenses. That's insignificant. Well, it's not insignificant. It's quite significant, but we're not talking about it in this video. What we are talking about is this here. 335% is the increase in the money supply. 335% increase to the money supply. Now, I could continue on going. So I will actually. Let's just skip a few years. Let's go to 2030. 2030, we're now spinning 7 times. First, all that money is spent by the 28th of February. Then between the 29th of February and 26th of April, this is spent. And now we're at a 96% E. So there's not a lot of leakage. And you know, there's a big question as can you have as high an E as that? I would actually say the craft in this is once we know the system, getting that high E and achieving it. Spinning more loses you money each time. So you have to have a very high E to be able to make a high spin. And we'll look at that in just a while. Let's see what prices. And just notice over here as well. Now the aid has gone down. Went up and now it's gone down. And I think next year it's going to go down. The year after that there'll be no aid at all. We only need aid in the first few years, and we don't actually need it. It's just if it's there, you may as well have it, because we will do better with it than whoever else was going to get it. And there's our single city, another suburb, or maybe another extension to a suburb, or maybe that's just one wants a really tall building, but that's expensive, so not necessary. But you know, people can make the suburbs how they want if they're paying for them. Companies can, or people. Right, so with 7 spins, cash flow is now at 71 billion and GDP potentially 35 billion if it is 50% of cash flow. Just gonna start to have a look on the left here. What have we got here? Global output GDP. But not inflation. Malawi network GDP. Okay. Here I see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to work out this figure here, which is blue divided by red. So it's 35 divided by 111. And this is telling us what percentage of global GDP has Malawi got. At the moment, it's still low at 0.0321. GDP's 35 billion. So that's about right. But we will see eventually this figure comes to 1%, at which point Malawi is achieving 1% of global GDP. And we talk in percentages of GDP, not figures, because the various growth that happens to both Malawi and the rest of the world it distorts the figures lots. So, by the time we get to 2080, it's out by about 4. So whatever inflation has caught up to about 4. So if you've got 1 trillion, if you've got 4 trillion in 2080, you've only actually got 1 trillion in today's terms. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, let's carry on going down. Let's skip a few years. Let's have a look at Angel City Free. Angel City Free is the year 2032. Yeah. And 9 spins bring us, got over that 100 barrier, 100 billion. Okay, let's go down to the next Angel City, which is Angel City 4. Here we can see we're now spinning 13 times and E has gone up to 99. Year's cash flow now 262. GDP 131, which means now that Malawi has 0.1% of GDP. And, you know, that would be a phenomenal result for Malawi to get to that point by this date. But I just don't see where I'm making a mistake. I've had other people look at this, people with double firsts from Cambridge, finance people. No one can find any mistakes. So I'm going to go down, try and find Angel City 4. Be at 2048. Here we are, Angel City 4. So by the time we get to Angel City 4, cash flow spin is 25. That it's now spinning 25 times, and E is 99.5. And this is when we talk in terms of super monopolies, because this is what's happening. It is monopolizing the cash flow within the network. So as 99.5% of everything that everybody spends is spent on something or some service made by the network. At this point, there is no need to pay the staff in dollars anymore, because the currency of the network credits, will be able to buy you anything you want at any store. At the beginning, it's not like that, so you have to give cash. But as the system is bigger and it makes more of what everybody wants, then one can have this potentially very, very high E. And because we've got the very, very high E, we can spin some more. So let's just have a, what are we talking about here in 2048, is it? Yeah. Yeah, 2048. 1 second. Let's get a little sip of water. Yeah, okay, so the cash flow now of all these spins, spin 1, spin 2, spin 3, spin 4, up to spin 25, is 867 billion now. And the cash flow is 433 billion. Which makes it has now 0.25% of GDP. Okay, we're going to go down to when we see 32. Here we go, 32, what year? 2055, we are spinning 32 times with an E of 99.5, which has generated 2.3 trillion. And remember, by this point, 2.3 trillion isn't 2.3 trillion. It's really more like 800 billion, something like that, in cash value. But anyway, I adjust for that later, so we don't worry about it. Right, so yeah, cash flow 2.3 trillion. GDP 1.1, And now we're at 0.5%, 0.56% of global GDP. And we're starting to see how, yeah, we can get ourselves to this, our target of 1% of GDP. So that's really going down all the way to the bottom now. 2060, 2061. Important point. At 2032, we create the second city that people could buy suburbs in, etc., etc. So there's starting with Angel City, which is Angel City 1. And then we have the first network city in 2024. We have the second network city in 2032, and we have a third network city in 2048. Albeit those three cities may just turn into about 16 large towns, maybe, or one big city and a few large towns. It's not specifically we're going to make 3 cities. It's, you know, we're going to make that amount of suburbs, and this is the money that drives everything. And note that where this used to be one, yes, it goes up by 0.5% a year. That's why this is racing ahead of inflation. Okay, so yeah, that's the point I wanted to make. New city, we start with one in 2024, new one in 2032, and a new one in 2048. Okay, now we're just going to cruise down to the bottom. A note on history 2, this is history 3 we're seeing. On history 2, we get to 1% of GDP by 2050, and we fight a load of recessions and depressions, and every time we actually increase cash flow while the rest of the world is going through recessions. That's history 2. Not going to talk about it anymore. Not in this video. Okay, Angel City 5, 2080. Our target. And we can see now we've got the 3 cities that are providing 16 billion each. We've got nominal exports. You can throw that away. And you could probably add some pretty good figures for exports. This Angel City 1, real estate sold. As I said, if we take this away, we only lose 10%. Not that I don't think we could sell it. It's just there's a question about whether we could. And we can't have anything where there's a question. We can't have any variable that is luck. Other than global growth and growth of Malawi, of course. Okay, so yeah, we see aid there. Aid stopped a long time ago. The majority of the money is coming from the law of conservation of revenue. So we've got nominal trade, Angel City 1, real estate, no aid, 3 cities, and money rolled over from the year before, law of conservation of revenue, which is by far the highest contributor to the money spent. It's savings. It's the savings that accelerate it. Or, you know, there's no or. It's the savings that's why it's now SRES. It used to be RES, revenue, efficiency, spin. Now it's savings plus revenue times efficiency times spin. Where are we with... There we go. There's Malawi's share of global GDP, 1%, 1.07. This year, 2080, they banked looks like 8 trillion, but remember that's in 2080 money. That's only probably 2 trillion in today's money, of which created 4 trillion in GDP, which, you know, probably in today's money would be 1 trillion. increase to the money supply, remember we saw this earlier, is now just under 3,000%. So by spinning it this way, every dollar is multiplied by 3,000%, and that's what we're getting. We have some variations here. If global growth is different, if Malawi growth is different. For instance, if global growth was nothing and Malawi growth was 1.2, Malawi would now have 1.4% of GDP. If global growth was 0 and Malawi growth was 5%, Malawi would have 5% of GDP. And it gets lower as well if it goes the other way. So all this comes down to, here we have the percentage of GDP rising, and that's really the benchmark. We can't really look at that 4 trillion because growth of everywhere else, but what we can look at is 1% of GDP. This is very important as well. Hold on while I have a sip of water. Right. In fact, this is critical. By using 6.25% of that cash flow, spending it on Spartan social housing, which is basically social housing, but it's luxury social housing. And here we can see we have estimated we can make 10 million homes, and that could potentially be 20 million if I was incorrect about my GDP assessment being 50% cash flow. So let's try and see how I made that figure, because it's a little bit complicated. Right, so we'll come back to the water in a second. We're going to the top. We're going all the way to the right to this section here. Net zero 5-star housing. Okay, so property cost is the build cost. How much are the bricks? How much is the labor? How much is the roof tiles? How much is the concrete, etc., etc. $150,000 spent on the things that make a house, which is which would be 6%, 6.25% of the of the cash flow made that year. 6.25% of the cash flow should equal 150. We have to go down, I think. I told you this was a bit of a mess. Right, okay, yeah, now this makes more sense, yeah. So where do we start here? P54. Let's see if we can find P54. Okay, that makes sense. P54 is the year's cash flow. Okay, so we're getting the year's cash flow, and we're timesing that by 6.25% to see how much cash flow we can spend that year on the 5-star social housing. Yeah, we have to go right to the end. Okay, so we got that, whatever it was, 6-point-something trillion times by 6.25% equals 355 billion. That sounds about right. Okay, so $150 per house. I am concerned here that the $150 I'm sure somewhere I adjusted for the cost, because obviously 150 now is okay. I'm going to pause this for a second while I solve this problem. I'll be back with you in just a sec. Okay, I'm back. So what I did is we're looking at the top of the spreadsheet before I have allocated, adjusted the cost of the house for growth. So we're going to go down the spreadsheet and we can see each year there it goes up to 161. That's the build cost. The year after it's 165. That's the build cost. And I'm not going to show you the exact calculation because it's probably going to take us all over the place. But look, we can see it. The cost goes up each year. And when we go down all the way to the bottom to sell $2,798, we can see here that's now 597,000. That's the same in that buys you the same amount as in 2080 as 150,000 buys you in 2024. Okay, so that's adjusted. So we've got total. If we go left, we'd see that it would be total cash flow times 6.25% equals 500 billion. Yeah. Which builds 875,000 homes. Now, what I do here is an adjustment for the cash flow variable, the David A. Moss cash flow variable. Because of that, we don't know if cash flow equals GDP or does cash flow equal 50% of GDP, and that we have used cash flow equals 50% of GDP. We have to also apply it to the homes built. So essentially, where we would think to buy, where we think we would sell, have homes for a sale GDP price of 857,000 of them, we're timesing that by 50%. So instead of 857,000, we've got 428,000 being built that year. Now this year adds to all the other years. If we go up, there we see social houses built, and below we can see total of houses. And if you go far earlier, you'll see all the. Okay, so we now add the houses built in 2080 to the houses built before, and that leads to 10.1 million houses built. Or if this CF cash flow variable isn't 50, if it's 100%, then that equals 20 million houses. But if the cash flow variable is 75, I've lost my place here. Cash flow variable means 8. Okay. Yeah. If the cash flow variable is 75, we would see, I guess, a figure closer to 10 and higher than 5. Sorry about this. Look, the bottom line is there's the 10 million homes built. The CFB, we can leave that to the next round of discussions, or the first round of discussions. I'm dying to talk to someone about this. Okay, so I hope we can see, if the cash flow variable is 50%, that this system is building 10 million homes, which means this system could be of an advantage in South Africa, Sienna's homeland. it's worth doing. I didn't think of South Africa first of all because the amount of money it makes was very small in compared to South Africa's big GDP. So it would be, you know, a little thing. There's no way you could push through a load of government reforms on tax based on what's going to be a little thing. But if you're coming along saying, well, actually, you know what, we're not going to make 10 million houses. We can make 20 million in South Africa. 20 million houses in South Africa is really needed. That would be, you know, that maybe house 60,000 people, 60 million people. Yeah. So that's really, really needed. So it's not just for Malawi at the bottom of the per capita GDP league. It's also for South Africa and, you know, other countries as well, like maybe another 100 countries, because this model hasn't relied in any way on trade. There's no diminishing returns when you've got a whole network, because if you relied on trade, then the more one got, the less the rest of them get. But it doesn't rely on trade, so you can have lots of these, and then you can sort of, you know, make a trade pact between the lot of them that makes the most sense, done by the software. La-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. So, yeah, we can see. Let's just go to this. I'm going to go to the actual spreadsheet. Sorry, the actual Word doc. And we're going to go to this here. And we have seen the beginning years. Let's just see the. Let's just pick one. 2076. 2076. 6.7 trillion. 76. 6.7. There you see. If you don't have any argument with the spin and the rest and the recycle efficiency, there is no argument to be had. You can take 10% off for the Angel City 1 homes, fine. You can't take anything off for the trade. The aid is insignificant compared to that, and it all comes down really to those city sales. And one thing I'm confident about is we can sell those city suburbs. There's going to be so much hype, and chances are they'll be sold before anybody even knows about them. The companies that I want to speak to, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Elon Musk, Richard Branson. Yeah, you know, those guys alone, buy a few suburbs. Do it now. It'd be a great investment. So what else is there to show here? We can now see and work out where this figure comes from each year, and this is displayed here, which leads to the 1% of GDP, which leads to those 10 million houses. And I think that's, you know, that's where we end it, because these are the figures. I'm saying, everybody, look, these are the figures. Come along. Oh yeah, there's a competition. I've yet to decide the reward. I think it will, for now, we'll have it as a reward of Villa Secrets, and whoever can break my formula, break this, so as instead of us by a zero, by a magnitude, i.e. instead of it making 24 trillion, it only makes 2.4 trillion, which in any case is still a lot of money. Anyone that can break that, and I'll give them 25% of Villa Secrets network, continental network cube in their area. And that's massive. That's a huge incentive for a company, Villa Secrets, that already exists and has a very strong strategy. 25% of that global cube. Yeah, okay, that's it. That's okay, so that's the competition. 25% of Villa Secrets continental cube in the area of the person who breaks this formula. And look, if someone else can turn around and say, you know what, we can't break this, this works, then they can have that as well, and more. You have a little bit of S-World VSN. I mean, that's the big one. That's where the smart money should go. Okay, so look, it's an accounting exercise. It's macroeconomics, but it's not. It's just normal accounting. This is just because the figures are large doesn't mean it's not real. We've seen this work, and you know, the super monopoly is the way. I'm not going to go into the, well, actually I am. Let's have a finish up with the book, and let's go down to special projects 1. Okay, this is what we're doing. In fact, no, we're gonna, yeah. Here are the special projects. Actually, this is just some UN and SRC stuff. Here are the projects. All of these projects get funded by the monopoly. That's why that's why people should let it be, because it does so much. You know, the cure for climate change in the third world. Every city must be net zero. Every business must be net zero. Here we see Paul Romer, a giant in terms of city developments. Elephant in the room is basically saying that everyone's forgetting about Africa in the climate because it's not making much at the moment, but it will in the future. So you really do have to pay attention. I'm just going to skip past the Village Secrets and let's just have a bit on the Experience Africa Special Project 1, Paul G. Allen. Okay, and now we've got the special projects again, the second lot of them. So all of this is being paid for. All of these special projects paid for out of the monopoly rents, the super monopoly rents. And here's the continental cubes, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I just want to skip forward now to the allocations. And here we see the allocating of the allocating of the monopoly rents to the 64 different causes, organizations. Okay, a note from Kate Raworth that we must be careful. We must not, you know, we must do this. It makes so much money that we can do it in a responsible way. I'm sure there's a way to build a house that really has no impact on the surroundings, and when the resources are made from the ground, it's not messing up things over there as well. Okay, and on this point, in fact, I think, have we got... sorry, well, this is, for me, this is why I'm doing it. This is S-World, Sienna Sky, Sienna's World, Sienna Foundation. Dedicated to Mum, Dad, and Caitlin Elizabeth, who is Sienna's mother. The end, actually at the end, goes to a little bit of future software. And I'm just going to... From Mary Gates, I particularly like this. Each one of us has to start out with developing his or her own definition of success. And when we have these specific expectations of ourselves, we're more likely to live up to them. Ultimately, it's not what we get or even what you give, it's what you become. And I really hope this project has made me become a giver. Yeah. Okay, so of course there's other advantages, but in general this project has been made under the principle of how much can I make for the world, not how much can I make for myself. In fact, we don't see a penny allocated to myself. Albeit I do own a lot of the companies. Anyway, look, time to go. Please, if there is a mistake anywhere, let me know. If there's not a mistake anywhere, then just get with me. Help me push this. Help me get this to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Maybe via Paul Collier, because Bill Gates likes his book and wants to speak with him. Right, that's it. I'm definitely going now. Thank you for if you got through this far. Thank you very much for watching. Get on board. Help me out. Bye.